Welcome to Season 2 of the Play Their Way podcast, where we talk about all things in child first coaching. I'm your host, Laura Jane Jones, and today's guest is Dr Alex Twitchen from the Open University. Dr Twitchen is a coach developer with a passion for understanding and exploring how coaches learn and improve their practice. He's also an experienced coach himself. Welcome along, Alex, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, RJ. Pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you on for Series 2 of the podcast because we've been talking a lot this time round about the concept of play and how it's about coaching evolution as opposed to revolution. So I guess I'm going to start by asking you a really broad question first, as I have warned everyone I've done each week so far. As someone who specialises in the way coaches learn and develop, how difficult is it for a coach to change the way they do things?
I think it can be quite challenging. Coaches often get very set in their ways, what they're comfortable with, what they believe coaching is about. Perhaps there's a fear of pushing yourself beyond what you know, what you feel comfortable with. So I think from a point of view of helping coaches to learn, develop their craft, as it were, it can be quite challenging to change perceptions, change beliefs, change values. I found it quite challenging, but rewarding kind of process. So in the past, I've worked with coaches in grassroots football, but I've also been fortunate to work with coaches that are in an academy, professional football club academy environment as well.
We've talked a lot as well on the podcast about coaching ethos, and a lot of our guests have said that whether you realise it or not, everyone does have their own coaching ethos. What do you think informs that? Is it the way that you've been coached yourself? Is it the way that you've played sport, or is it just your human instinct?
I think it's a lot of things. It's a combination of things. It's the way you've been coached, the way you've played, the experiences you have, the kind of education that you've had. I think it's also a bit more than just ethos and philosophy. So I wouldn't say that I have a coaching philosophy as such. For me, it's more about my identity as a coach, what I think coaching means to me and how it relates to who I am as a person. So I think when you're supporting coaches, it's really important to try and not necessarily understand what their philosophy is, because they can sometimes express that quite well, but who are they as a person and what underpins that? And you're almost kind of developing the person rather than developing the coach and getting them to reflect on what coaching means to them. So that's, I think, part of the nuance of supporting and helping coaches.
So if we're talking about a coach changing the way that they practice and administer in a sports environment, we're not telling them they have to change their values per se. It's about the way that they go about their business when they're in those situations.
Yeah, and I think in my experience, the way I've approached it, first of all, you try and get to know the person that you're supporting. But often, particularly I think in grassroots football, they want to enjoy their coaching. So it's not just that they want their children and young people, the people they're coaching, to enjoy themselves, but they also want to enjoy their coaching. And I think they can often find coaching quite stressful. Oh, what am I going to do tonight? How am I going to look after these 10, 15 children? So I found, whether you call it a tactic or a strategy, that a way into supporting them and helping them to develop their practice is to say, like, well, what do you want to get out of your coaching? You know, don't you want to enjoy it? You don't want your coaching to be like a stress. And then we can start to explore ways in which not only can they help their participants to enjoy participating in the sessions, but they can enjoy it as a coach as well.
One of the things you've talked about there is that stress around kind of lesson planning and programming. And I think anyone who's ever been in any situation, whether they're coaching children, teachers, PTs, that repetitive instinct of having to do those things and do it differently each time is stressful. When we're talking about play their way and using a child-first approach, we're never going to lose structure and we always want the same successful outcomes. But by putting the onus on kids to guide us, does it take the stress out of coaches at all, do you think?
Yeah, and I think that's how I've kind of developed my own coaching over the last 10 years or so. So I would say, for want of a better term, it is quite game-based. So what my approach is, I will ask the children, the young people that I'm coaching, what do you think we need to work on? You know, you tell me, what do you think we need to improve? And you just get a bit of flip chart paper, some pens, get them to write it down. And when I've done this in the past, you know, you can be amazed at the ideas that they come up with. I've done it with a team that I'm coaching recently. And they came up with a list, and I didn't disagree with anything that they said there. And then I'll just kind of shape that into a loose plan. And then in terms of going from session to session, I don't plan my sessions in detail. I don't have like outcomes or coaching points or anything like that. I'll just like have a game. I'll have an idea as to how I think.
It's a fire alarm.
Fire alarm. We'll pick it up.
Yeah. Yeah. You happy to pick that up?
Yeah. So I don't necessarily plan my coaching sessions in great detail. I don't have lots of coaching points. I don't have a series of practices. Basically, I start with a game. And it's a game which I've designed because it reflects what my players have said they think we need to work on. And I won't even necessarily introduce it in the sense that you've told me we need to work on this, and this is a game that I've kind of designed, created that will enable us to do that. I'll just say, right, tonight, here we go, we'll try this. And then I just let it go, just let it flow. And I'll just step back, observe. When we have like a natural break, I might pose a few questions. So for me, that is how I've kind of evolved my coaching. And I use various different ways of doing that, kind of like use headbands. So we have a game where the players nominate one person to wear a headband. That player's got to get on the ball before you can pass it over a line. So I don't tell them how they're going to do that. They've just got to figure out the way that they can do that. And we'll have a conversation like, oh, why did you give the headband to that player? What was your reasoning? Well, what would happen if you gave the headband to that player who's playing in a different part of the pitch? Well, why don't we have a go doing that? We do another good game, and I find particularly younger players really like this. You can put the goal in any part of your opponent's half. You decide where you want to put the goal. But every time you score in that goal, the goal's going to turn through 90 degrees. So it completely changes the kind of dynamics of the game. So just a couple of examples there where I'll just, as I say, design a game, but I can adapt it, I can evolve it, I can go with the flow if you like, just work with the players to kind of develop the practice as we go. And all the time in the back of my mind is, okay, is this practice helping them to develop the areas of the game that they said they want to work on? So that tends to be my approach now.
I love the headband one because accessorizing is always key. Have you always coached like that, or is this something that you've found?
I would say yes. I've always tended to take, like I say, whatever kind of term we want to use, a game-based approach to coaching. I think I was fortunate that when I was a young coach, and this is going back best part of 30 years now, I was really inspired by a person that I worked with, a chap called Jim Kelman. We used to run the fun weeks at Bisham Abbey. And Jim was like, we've got these children from 10 till 3 every day during the school holidays. Sometimes there was in excess of 100 of them, so quite big groups. And we just used to put them into games, and we just used to have a sort of almost like a library of games that we played. And that was the best way to engage those children. And we never had any kind of discipline problems. We never had any lines. We never had any cones. And so I think I was fortunate that I was significantly influenced in the way that I coach because of that experience when I was, 19, 20 years of age. And I've continued to evolve it. And over the last 10 years, I've been a grassroots mentor for the FA. So I've spent a lot of time in grassroots football, questioning why are people doing what they're doing in grassroots football and trying to think, is there a better way? My experiences around children's rights stemmed from the work that we do at the OU with FIFA, supporting their FIFA Guardians program, which is around safeguarding and developing, putting in place safeguarding officers in every member association and developing safeguarding policies and procedures. But we were fortunate to work on that with our colleagues from UNICEF, and in all the online courses that we developed, we did incorporate a little bit of children's rights in each one of those courses. So that kind of really opened a window for me onto children's rights, and actually it kind of, how can I put it, chimed with the way I think about coaching. And I've kind of just read more about it, used it in my practice, reflected on it, and that's helped me to I would say what it's done is it's made me more conscious of asking children and giving them a space to express their voices. So I might not have done that as much in the past as what I do now. And again, I've just used all kinds of, experimented with different ways in which they can express themselves.
The UNICEF rights of the child underpin everything that Play Their Way is about in terms of our 3 pillars in voice, choice and journey. But there are accusations from some people that they're just buzzwords. What's your answer to them?
No, I think good coaching we don't just coach well for the sake of coaching, but good coaching is a children's right. That's the way I kind of look at it. It is their right to be coached well. And it's our duty as coaches to try and coach as well as we can all the time. And I think children's rights for me, it kind of does make you kind of reflect on what you do as a coach. And I think voice, choice and journey, they're not just buzzwords, but they give you an opportunity to go a bit deeper into children's rights and explore them in more detail. What does voice mean? How do you incorporate voice in your coaching? What are the different ways you incorporate it? So I've heard people say, well, voice is just giving children the opportunity to say what it is they want to do. I don't think that's necessarily an accurate kind of way of expressing voice. I want my children, the children that I coach, to have a voice in every aspect of the coaching process. So planning, what we do during the sessions, when we review and evaluate the progress that we're making. And when I've been working with clubs, I've been saying so as a club, how do you incorporate children and young people's voices in your club? Do you have a committee, a youth committee, or do you have a young person sitting on your club committee? So for me, voice has to be present in all aspects of coaching, not just some. And there are various different ways that you can do that and support children to do that.
Have you ever met coaches who regard children's rights as a barrier to coaching, though?
Yeah, without doubt. So I have a real story. So I was working in the academy as a part-time coach, in a professional football club academy as a part-time coach. And I was just explaining to someone else about the work that we do at the OU. It was in connection with FIFA and so forth, and talking about children's rights and such. And he paused for a bit, and then he goes, children's rights. Just another barrier to producing elite players.
Oh.
I thought, oh no, maybe this isn't the kind of right environment for me anymore. But yeah, it stuck in my mind. I went back after the session, wrote it down straight away because I thought I'm going to use that somewhere at some point. But I just think that's a total misunderstanding about what children's rights are. And I think that's part of what we want to do, particularly in that kind of performance space, that talent space, that children's rights for me, and I think I've seen it enhances performance. It's not a barrier to performance. So when I've worked in, as I say, as a part-time coach in a professional football club academy, I've tried lots and lots of ways of incorporating the player's voice into what I do. I've used a very playful approach, game-based approach to practice. No lines, no drills, kind of like the games that I've described with the headbands and such like. And there is no way that I've seen it being of detriment to their development. If anything, and well, they tell me it's enhanced their development and they've enjoyed it. I still keep in touch with some of the parents of boys that I've coached previously in that club, and they tell the boys fondly reflect on their time with me. So I think children's rights is as applicable in a talent environment as it is in a participation environment. And I think one message we need to get across to coaches is it's not an either or. It's not a question of giving children a voice and not developing performance. It's doing both at the same time. You can help children to enjoy what they're doing, but they can also be developing and performing to a high level at the same time. It's not a binary choice that you've got to make.
One thing I've got to pick up on, we know that there are detractors to the concept of Play Their Way and centering play in how we coach young people. You've talked about your games-based approach and how you always start sessions that way. There will be coaches who say, but if I start the session like that, as opposed to using it as the carrot at the end of the session, I'll never gain control of them again. How false is that in your actual experiences of it?
I just think that's a misunderstanding. Yeah, what do children want to do? They want to play, okay? And play for me is a tricky term because I think we can define play in various different ways, and I get that. But children can organise their own play. That's fine, but in a maybe not in a sporting context, but they also want to learn and develop, and that's what they want to do. And I think play can also support that learning and development. And what makes coaching unenjoyable, I think, for a lot of coaches is when they try and control children, put them in lines, because for me, that's a bit of a recipe then for disaster. You spend more time dealing with behaviour than you do coaching. Children want to play, so put them in an environment where they want to do what they want to do. And don't worry that you're not somehow telling them what to do, because, and this is where I think you become a really skillful coach. Your skill as a coach is designing those games in such a way that to the children, they're just playing. But actually, simultaneously, they're learning and developing at the same time because of the way that you've organised that game. So again, like particularly when I was working with grassroots coaches, I say, let's kind of move away from this idea that the game is what they do at the end. Start with a game and just go from there and just continue to kind of develop that game.
How much do you think the problem is that the outcomes that we are looking at are always about results as opposed to development and enjoyment and retention of participants?
So I think that's very kind of adult driven, isn't it? It's adults who see the game and measure success by what the results are and what the outcomes are. I think for children, as soon as the game's over, whether they've won or lost, they've forgotten about what the outcome is. I think we have to see things as coaches through the eyes of children and not through our eyes as adults. It's almost educating adults as much as it is educating, not necessarily educating children, but educating adults, parents and other coaches and so forth, when we all just measure success in terms of what the results are at the end of the day.
So in terms of educating coaches and coaching coaches, anecdotally, how much success have you seen in coaches who have adjusted the way that they are going about things and are centering children more than just prescriptive coaching?
So I think directly, this past year I've been working with our local under 10 team. So it's a new team. We created it last year. My next door neighbour kind of runs it. His son plays in the team. Last summer he knocked on my door and said, "Alex, can you help me?" Never done any coaching before in his life. He just wanted to provide an opportunity for more children in the village to play football. So I kind of said, okay, all right, I'll come and help out. So we had myself and Matt and Ben. Matt and Ben never coached before. Typical sort of dads whose sons play on the team. And I think if we were to ask them, they have now got a completely different view of coaching to what they had last August. Like, "Alex, you don't say anything in the games." I know, because as far as I'm concerned, once the children step over that white line, it's up to them.
Yeah. We
can't tell them what to do. In fact, if we have to shout instructions to them from the sidelines, I'd say we've failed in our role as a coach. We haven't prepared them properly. So I think they're amazed that I don't tell the players what to do. But they've seen through the evolution of the team and the level of performance is going up. They're going, right, yeah, I kind of completely now agree with the way you're approaching this.
As an academic, they must be the dream case study. But what happens for coaches who have been there longer, who've been doing this a while and actually are having, whilst listening to our podcast, the realisation that I'm not centering children and I'm not centering play, but I want to adjust, I want to adapt. How much is there a challenge for them to move the needle, to change things?
Have a go, experiment, try things. Think, okay, how can I design a game which gets everyone involved? There's so much content on the internet, isn't there? Twitter, Facebook, you're not short of content. I think it's just your approach. And thinking also that if children are involved in playing a game, or somehow I'm not coaching, yes, you are, because your skill has been in designing and creating that environment. For me, that's coaching. Telling children, do this, do that, don't do this, do that instead. That's just instructing and telling people what to do. It's not, you're not creating an appropriate environment for children to thrive, to flourish, to learn. You're not giving them the opportunity to solve problems and actually begin to recognize the problem in the first place, or set problems for their opponents. So it's encouraging coaches to experiment. And in a coach developer role, I've tried to identify, rather than me forcing myself on a coach, say, right, I want to do this. I've tried to find those almost priceless moments where a coach says, Alex, can you just help me with this? I'm thinking of doing this tonight as a session. What do you think? And that takes quite a lot of kind of relationship building first before they get to the point where they come to ask you for assistance and help. But once they've come to you, you can then say, okay, right, can I just suggest that we might do this? And I'm happy to lead it and show you. And those, I think, are your priceless moments as a coach developer, where that's when you can begin to have influence. When someone like a coach has asked you to help them, and what do you think about this? And you can seize that moment and show them a different way of doing something. So I've done that at a Premier League club in their academy. The coach has come to me and said, I'm thinking of doing this tonight. What do you think? And that's like, yes, this is the moment. This is the moment I've been waiting for. And I've gone, right, can I just suggest? And I'll talk you through it. So we talked through it for about half an hour, 40 minutes before the practice. I could see he was a bit skeptical, because it was using the headbands. So I said, look, let's just give it a go. So we went out. They're a group of under 15s, very, very talented, introduced the game. This is the objective. Right, who are you going to give the headband to? And the boys are looking at me like, we got to make a decision. It's like, who to give the headband to? Yeah, you can give it to anyone. Okay, boom. And we got it going. Over 45 minutes, that session just ramped up in terms of intensity until we got to the point where they say, I want the headband. Give me the headband. I say, well, what about having two headbands? What do you mean? Two players have got to get on the ball. Right, I'll have the headband. So we've stopped. We've gone back in. He goes I've never seen anything like that.
How much?
And that's the moment. That's the moment. If they can see that, I think you've got them from a point of influence, if you see what I mean.
Do coaches need to park their ego to have those moments, do you think? One of the resources that we have available on the Play Their Way website is, of course, the questionnaire that you can give to your participants where they can give you feedback. Yeah. How much do coaches need to kind of take it on the chin sometimes that kids might say things they don't really want to hear, but for the better are going to adapt their coaching systems? Yeah,
well, who's the most important voice? It's the children. So you've got to listen to that. That would be, and it might hurt, but that's the most important voice. And if you don't give them the space to express their voice, you're never going to know what they truly feel. You're always going to be second guessing.
In real life, what are the outcomes that you're seeing from this child first approach in terms of young athletes?
So I think at one level, if you make it enjoyable and playful, they keep coming back. I think that's is quite a significant outcome. That's that kind of retention. Secondly, I think they're more engaged. They start to reflect a bit more about what they're doing, whether they become better problem solvers or not, but they start to think about the game that they're playing in a little bit more detail. And you can have more, and you can tell that because you can have more interesting conversations with them about what they're doing and why and what's they're thinking and so forth. So I think there's definitely kind of an impact in their understanding of the game and what they do and why and how they think about their own performance. So I would say definitely in terms of if you make it an enjoyable, safe environment where they feel comfortable, but at the same time it can be, depending on the context, quite challenging, quite stretching. If they go away and you say, right, that's it, we've run out of time, and they're going, is that it? Are we finished? Then you know they've enjoyed it. But I think also from another level, it's developing their understanding of whatever particular sport they're involved in. But also beyond that, I think putting children's best interests first and accommodating their needs, it helps them to grow as an individual. And what I mean by that is I think it goes beyond just giving them skills like learning to work with other people, developing resilience, teamwork, cooperation, so forth. And I think back to my own experience of sport, I actually think it helps them to shape who they are as an individual. So we often talk now, don't we, about coaching the person in front of you. Well, who is that person? How does that person see themselves? And as a coach, how are you how are you supporting their development as an individual and their understanding of who they are and their identity? And that for me really goes, I think, to the heart of it, because it goes beyond developing social skills. It's helping children and young people develop this kind of sense of themselves and who they are as who they are as a person, as an individual.
You've coached like this for a long time, but are you still surprised each time by the way that children interact, engage?
Yeah, I think when you give children a voice, you will be amazed at the insight and understanding that they have. You know, even like the group I'm working with at the moment, 9 and 10-year-olds, just give them that opportunity and they will constantly surprise you with how much they know and how much they're aware of. I think one of the failings that we often have as coaches is that we assume that children are incapable and incompetent. We don't recognise their capabilities and their competence. We don't give them the opportunity to actually express that. And I think if you do, you'll be surprised at just what they are capable of rather than what they're incapable of, if I can put it like that.
Alex, you've been an absolutely amazing guest today, and this has been a fantastic half an hour. And I'm sure that if anyone's interested in making some money, putting something into the stocks and shares of headbands in the UK might be the way to go, because I'd imagine that the sales of those are going to go through the roof after people have listened to this one. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. We hope you've enjoyed. Be sure to leave us a review and share this with someone else who you think might enjoy it too. Check out our website, www.playtheirway.org, and follow Play Their Way on social media, at Play Their Way on TikTok, X and LinkedIn, and at Play Their Way UK on Facebook and Instagram.